which one is better.
We may have a new contender for best day at work ever. On this episode of Drive Reviews, we get a sneak peek at Jeep's first ever electric car, the Jeep Avenger. A special treat with Glenn in the 2024 Mclaren 750S.
Oh, this engine is incredible.
But first we take a look at the Hyundai Santa Fe.
In terms of new generation model changes, this is a big one. The Hyundai Santa Fe, we all know it. It's been around as a large SUV for quite a long time in Australia, but this new one looks nothing like the previous generation whatsoever. It's bigger, it's boxier, and it's got a really interesting design going on, and I think it really stands out as well in comparison to other Hyundai vehicles. But the question is this new Santa Fe any good? We're currently here in Korea, right in the midst of the city at the moment. We're going to have our first chance to drive this new large SUV from Hyundai. It's going to be a 7-seater, there's going to be new powertrains, lots of new technology as well. Let's have a look at the details.
We are yet to know exactly what kind of pricing is in store for the Australian market. What we do know, however, is that it will arrive firstly with a 1.6-litre turbocharged petrol hybrid powertrain. That has a combined output of 169 kilowatts and 350 newton meters, and runs through a 6-speed torque converter automatic gearbox. This new Santa Fe will also come with a 2.5-litre turbocharged petrol engine. That comes out of the Sonata and it replaces the option of a naturally aspirated V6. This makes 206 kilowatts and 421 newton meters, running through an 8-speed dual-clutch automatic gearbox. In comparison to the previous generation model, this new Santa Fe is about 50 millimeters longer overall, and the wheelbase has grown by about 50 mils as well. It's slightly taller, but the same width of 1900 mils carries over. And like the previous generation model, this new Santa Fe has room for 7 on board, with 2 up front, 3 in the middle, and 2 in the back.
One thing I do want to talk about is the size of the car overall. I'm standing here now, and you kind of assume when you look at the pictures that this vehicle is really big. You think kind of Land Rover Defender in terms of overall size. It's not. It's not actually that tall overall, although it is definitely bigger than the previous generation model. These tail lights are interesting. They sit quite low on the back, and I think that's part of the different look of this Santa Fe overall. They wrap around the sides as well. The sides cinch in quite a little bit. It's got a different look, absolutely, and you've got a H motif there, which I really like. This car looks great at night. That motif is up the front as well. Let's have a look at the interior, because I think that is such an important element for a family SUV. Let's have a look. Hyundai have really focused on practicality and storage. It's one of my favorite things when I look at a family car. Let's start with this center console area here. There's a fair bit going on. Twin wireless charging pads there. We've got 2 USB-C power outlets, and we've got big storage area underneath as well. There's another storage shelf there above the glove box. So in terms of just putting things in places, you've got a lot of options for all of that stuff you tend to carry around with you. The climate controls, they've got a combination of digital buttons here, but also dials and physical buttons. Then we've got these twin 12.3 curved infotainment displays. We've seen that on the Kona, we've seen that on the Sonata, now we're gonna have it in the Santa Fe. It's a good system, the infotainment's great, and the digital cluster in front of the driver provides a fair amount of information as well. But let's have a look at how much space is in the second row. First thing to talk about, as always, is space overall. That's my driving position up front there, and I've got a lot of leg room left over there. Headroom is really good as well. Once again, that boxy shape yields dividends for the interior of this car. And I like what's going on here with this center console, because on top of having access into the center console like that, you can also open this shelf from down lower as well, and it's all part of the same space. Let me just show you. I've got my wallet here. Gonna open this up, pull this little tray out of the way. I'll pop that in there. There you go. Look, that's one big space for everyone to access. It actually works really well. I haven't seen that before. These specs will change slightly according to what we get in Australia and the different spec levels. We'll wait for all of those details as they come. But as a first look, this car looks to really fit the bill as a family vehicle.
Coming up next, we take the Santa Fe for a test drive. And still to come, a sneak peek at Jeep's first electric car, the Avenger. Welcome back to Drive Reviews. Later, we take a look at Jeep's first ever electric car, the Jeep Avenger. But first, let's take the Hyundai Santa Fe for a test drive.
Let's talk about the Santa Fe, because if the diesel's not around and you're looking at the Santa Fe, you're probably going to want to lean towards this hybrid because it's a little bit more efficient and you can get a bit further out of each tank before you need to refill. And in terms of when you're driving, it does feel nice and smooth in terms of blending those power sources. Once you punch it down a little bit, it's 1.6 litre engine, and the electric motor actually gives you decent acceleration here. It's not as powerful as the 2.5 turbo, of course, but it's good enough, I think, for what this car needs to do. As you're coasting, it's saving fuel and the electric motors are doing the heavy lifting there. That is a nice thing and it's really good for fuel economy. Now, once you take off from a set of lights, the electric motor doesn't let you take off up to 30 or 40 or 50. The petrol engine does kick in relatively early, so you're not going to get a really electric car driving experience, so to speak. But from these impressions so far, you do seem to get a good net balance of efficiency out of the vehicle, so I think that is more important. Now, in terms of ride comfort, I'll point out that we're currently driving a car on 18-inch alloy wheels, and it seems to be the choice from what I can tell so far in terms of having the best ride around town. It's got, you would almost say, an American style tune to it, I suppose. Feeling perhaps a little floaty for some tastes, but for an SUV that's going to be loaded up, cruising around town, taking on potholes and speed bumps all the time, I think it fits the bill quite well.
I've got to say, there is a lot to like about this car. The main strength for me is just the size and the comfort and the practicality of the interior. It's much more spacious than the previous generation Santa Fe, which is a little bit more of a 5+2. I think this is even going to put a little bit of pressure on the Palisade, to be honest with you, which is even larger again. This is going to hit the right notes for a lot of Australians who need 7 seats.
Jeep is a brand best known for its big, thirsty, off-road capable 4x4s, but the brand's first ever electric vehicle is almost the complete opposite. This right here is a 2024 Jeep Avenger, a city-sized light electric SUV designed to tackle the rigours of everyday life rather than big Australia. We've been given a sneak peek at the Jeep Avenger before its launch in late 2024, so come with us to discover more about the 2024 Jeep Avenger. Aside from sharing its name with a bunch of superheroes, the Avenger's notable for being the American brand's first electric offering in Australia. That's a big milestone for the brand, which is beginning to offer more hybrid alternatives of its vehicles, but the introduction of a full electric vehicle is a hallmark moment in any car maker's plans, and Jeep is making a big deal of the Avenger's introduction. It's already offered in parts of Europe and manufactured at a Stellantis facility in Poland. According to the brand, it'll deliver a 400-kilometre range based on European testing. They also say it'll take 24 minutes to charge from 20 to 80% based on a maximum charge rate of 100 kilowatts. It uses a 54 kilowatt-hour battery pack which supplies power to a 115 kilowatt and 260 Newton-metre motor. That's not especially powerful, but then again, the Avenger's pretty small too. Though it's more of an SUV body style, its size footprint is roughly equivalent to a light hatch. In terms of size, it's comparable to an MG ZS EV, BYD Atto 3 and Hyundai Kona Electric. While it's not as likely to be found off the beaten track, there are a lot of similarities between this car and other Jeep models. You've got the iconic 7-bar grille up the front, and though it's been closed off in this electric version, there are other things like these recessed headlights and plastic cladding all around the car for enhanced protection. Down the side, in terms of styling, you've got a set of 18-inch diamond-cut alloy wheels, Avenger scripting here on the door, and two-tone body parts. You've got a black roof and black mirrors, and it all ends down here in this hidden door handle on the C-pillar here. Around the rear, you've got a hidden charge port on the rear haunch there, and that's a CCS port. You've got a kick sensor boot, but for the time being, I'll open it like so, and that paves way to a 380-litre space. You've also got E badges on the tailgate to signify its electric intentions. Inside the cabin, the Avenger catches the eye with big 10.25-inch screens, both in front of the driver and handling the infotainment. And you've also got this big, wide, yellow dash panel here, which looks nice. It also has integrated ambient lighting as well. Now, one thing here I'm really impressed by is the amount of interior storage. They've got a massive, deep center console bin down here, a lift-up center console bin here, and it all has a lot of storage space for your odds and ends. Even down here for the center console, you can almost reach your entire arm in there, which is really impressive. Combined, Jeep says it totals over 30 litres of additional storage space. Cabin materials all feel nice, and it's obvious that Jeep is planning this car to fit in above some of the more budget-oriented electric car offerings. Thankfully, there are still physical controls for things like volume and temperature, which we love. In terms of driving position, the Jeep has a traditional lofty seat which allows for a good view out over the bonnet. How the model fares once it's landed and launched in Australia is another matter. However, the car is already winning fans in Europe, where it was launched this time last year. To stay up to date with Jeep and its all-electric Avenger SUV, read the full story on drive.com.au.
Coming up, Glenn speeds things up with the 2024 Mclaren 750S, offering a special treat on the Estoril racetrack in Portugal. Welcome back to Drive Reviews. Before we put the helmet on, let's take a closer look at the 2024 Mclaren 750S.
Meet McLaren's Frankenstein. Well, actually that's not right, because Frankenstein was the scientist's name. The monster was just called the creature. And this is no monstrous creature. In fact, it's more like a griffin. You know, that part lion, part eagle? This is the McLaren 750S. It's basically a successor for the 6-year-old McLaren 720S. And it is McLaren's current apex predator. With 552 kilowatts and 800 Newton meters, it is also the most powerful series production car that the Kiwi-born, British-based car manufacturer has ever made. The McLaren 750S is due down under early in 2024. It has just arrived in European dealerships, which is why we've flown halfway around the world to test drive the car in Portugal, at the Estoril racetrack no less. All right, so what has changed? Now the answer to that is 30, which straight away tells me that the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy got it wrong. 30 is the number of extra horsepower from McLaren's twin-turbocharged 4-litre V8 engine. This one now has 750 horsepower, hence the name. 30 is also the number of kilograms in weight saving compared to the old 720S, making this car 200 kilograms lighter than its nearest rival. 30 is also the percentage of parts that McLaren claims have been replaced or upgraded to make the 750S lighter and more powerful. Now those are the headlines. The full list of changes is quite comprehensive, and if you want to see those, check out my written review on drive.com.au. But for now, I'm just going to give you the top levels that you need to know, because let's be honest, we want to see this car on track. So here I go. I'll go through them as fast as I can. The McLaren 750S is available as a coupe and retractable hardtop Spider. Prices start at $585,800 for the coupe and $654,600 for the Spider. Styling is basically carryover, but updated with aerodynamic enhancements to improve downforce and aero balance without overly increasing drag. Active Aero includes a rear wing that can change its angle of attack. The wing is also 60mm higher than on the 720S to give the McLaren P1-derived single exhaust more clearance. McLaren's new generation of linked hydraulic suspension debuts here with new springs, 4% softer at the front, 3% stiffer at the rear, dampers, revised geometry, and bespoke tuning to heighten the 750S's dynamic capabilities. Of course, the electrically assisted hydraulic steering has been sharpened, and the brakes are carbon ceramics for maximum stopping power. As for the mid-mounted engine, it has 750 horsepower and 800 Newton meters. It's rear-wheel drive, of course, and has a 7-speed sequential shifter with a shorter final drive, which cuts top speed to 332. Not that you'd care, because McLaren claims acceleration figures of 2.8 seconds for the first 100, another 4.4 seconds for the second 100, and 20 seconds all up to go from standstill to 300 kilometres an hour, a speed which in Australia is known as lock me up and throw away the cage. The interior has been refined with a new driver-centric column-mounted instrument display, flanked by relocated rocker switches to control the active dynamic settings. There's also a cool little Speed Kiwi favourites button that lets the driver save their preferred aero, suspension, powertrain and transmission settings to deploy in one hit. Naturally, the 750S wears Pirelli P0 Trofeo tyres to maximise grip. And luggage capacity, if you have to know, is 150 litres at the front and 210 litres at the rear. If you buy the Spider, the back boot drops to a bathroom bag sized 58 litres.
Now we also have USB-A and USB-C ports, and get this, Apple CarPlay. How cool is that? So now it's time to drive as fast as I can.
Up next, we take the Mclaren 750S flat knacker on the Estoril racetrack.
What an absolute sweetheart of a machine.
Welcome back to Drive Reviews. It's the moment you've been waiting for. Glenn hits the track with the 2024 Mclaren 750S.
Let's see what this thing can do.
Okay, hang on a tick. Before the track attack starts, I need to come clean. I had planned to hot lap the 750S while providing critical analysis and insights. As you're about to witness, I am not that talented. I can drive and talk at everyday speeds. What I can't do, it turns out, is drive a Mclaren 750S flat knacker at a strange racetrack on the other side of the world and give you any useful analysis or insight.
200 kilometres an hour, 220.
I can read a speedo, and I can also remember to breathe. Lucky for me.
Stay in the middle of the track. Come back in, hit the apex. Oh, this engine is incredible.
I wanted to tell you about how the engine mods boost performance, how the sharper steering rack makes it hungrier on turn-in, how the suspension updates make it more progressive and playful on the limit. I had wanted to tell you that the carbon ceramic brakes are some of the most potent stoppers I've ever experienced, and they can turn 270 kilometres an hour into just 70 kilometres an hour in little more than 150 metres. You know, my incisive expert opinion. Instead, this Mclaren is so fast and so furious that it maxed out my brain and reduced me to a mumbling idiot.
To fourth gear, all right. Coming around onto the main straight at Estoril. And oh, this car feels so alive. It's talking to me like you would not believe. And it's screaming at me too. 240, 250, 260, 270. Holy
Sorry for that. I meant to say golly gee. 0 to 100 in 2.8 seconds. 100 to 200 in 4.4 seconds. 0 to 300 in 20 seconds. The top speed is 332 kilometres an hour, which interestingly is down 9 kilometres an hour on the 720S because of that shorter final drive ratio. Lucky it's got brilliant brakes then, and if you want a visual cue to the stopping power of the brakes, check out how the seatbelts levitate away from my body at the end of the main straight.
I don't know what McLaren has done here, but they've somehow made a car that is more ferocious, more insane, and yet more playful, more malleable, more willing to work with me, whatever my limits are, and help me get the most out of the track and the car. What an absolute sweetheart of a machine. But what a brutal, brutal monster as well. It feels like it's right there for me, and when I hit the limits of whether it's my ability or the car's ability, stepping over the limits is really quite progressive. It's not going to bite you. Well, it certainly hasn't bit me, and those are some of the hardest laps I think I've ever done in a road car on a racetrack, let alone in a McLaren. I'm struggling to think of anything that's I've been able to push this hard and yet feel this confident in. For me, I think that's this car's biggest trick. Actually, no, it's not. I think this car's biggest trick is how rewarding it is, how playful it is, how much character it's got. I know in the early days of McLaren's rebirth in, 2011 MP412C, a lot of critics, I think me included, suggested that that car was a bit too clinical, a bit aloof. This car is anything but. I drove it on the road and it's got all the playfulness and the backfiring and burping and farting and growling, and it's got the theatre of a supercar. But it's also surprisingly comfortable on the road. And yet, get it onto a racetrack like this and Holy hell. What a weapon. What an absolute weapon.
That says it all, really. It sums up McLaren's towering achievement with the 750S. In hindsight, I think McLaren's biggest achievement has been to make this car so approachable and so manageable, but also so involving. I've never felt this empowered to explore the limits before. The McLaren 750S doesn't ever make me fear it. It's the absolute opposite, in fact. The 750S invites me to leap out of the comfort zone and dance with the devil at the edges of existence, because that's where the magic really happens. So what was the point of the whole Frankenstein monster griffin metaphor at the start? Well, the McLaren 750S takes the best parts of the 720S, the P1, the Senna and the 765LT to become the best series production McLaren yet. And boy, does this Frankenbaby deliver, monstrously. It's also likely to be the last purely internal combustion engined McLaren before the company dives deeper into the electrification movement it started with the Artura hybrid last year. So if you're a multi-millionaire with $750 million to blow on an automotive indulgence on a toy, very few cars can engage and excite as much as the new 750S.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode. Don't forget to head to drive.com.au if you'd like to revisit any of the specifications of the cars we reviewed this week.